If you're like most entrepreneurs, meetings absolutely suck for some reason. And today we're going to break down exactly why that might be and how you can run better, more structured, and more productive meetings. Welcome back to Montreal's Elite Unleashed. I'm your host, Logan Boyce, alongside, as always, Jonathan Ehrlich. What is up, my guy? Today, like I said, we are going to be talking about meetings, and it's honestly the bane of a lot of entrepreneurs' existences, especially when you start to grow your company beyond just a solopreneur status and having other people holding them accountable, and how to get that cohesive goal in motion and to have everybody not, think, oh, there's a meeting coming up on Friday or Monday. Oh God, I can't wait to blow my brains out that day. So we'll go through some of the trappings that happen. But John, why don't you take it away for us here?
Well, I think I've been in many different settings where we have various types of meetings. And I think the purpose of the meeting really is to keep everybody aligned and keep the ship sailing in the right direction. But I also know that, especially for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs as they're starting out, they don't really understand how to grasp meetings or how to just run them properly. And that's why you have situations where people just don't want to be a part of meetings, or they have meetings that are just not purposeful.
Yeah.
And just kind of run out the clock for no reason. And people are just waiting for it to be done so they can leave. Right.
Yeah. A lot of times I remember earlier in my career, we would have meetings at whatever, real estate office that I was affiliated with at the time. And it was always such a pain in the ass. And they'd have to make the meetings mandatory for you to attend them. And I think that speaks volumes, is that if your meeting is not providing some kind of value, and it's okay if the value is not being seen immediately by the people, but it has to be providing some level of value so that you don't have to like forcefully stick a dagger in somebody saying, hey, I promise you're gonna love this, trust me. But then if people are not excited, you're going to have problems.
Well, and I think that's it. The purpose of the meeting needs to be there, because if you're going to a meeting and you're like, great, let me just go waste another hour of my day that I could be spending doing something productive, versus saying like, oh my God, I have all of these things that I need to get out there so that we're all focused and working in the same direction. I have my deliverables ready to be able to show what I've been working on, making sure everybody else is working on their things so we're all aligned and being able to grow from there. So I guess understanding the basics of what a meeting should look like, and then how that can grow into an advanced meeting, is just so important for a business to be able to actually effectively grow. Without that, you're going to find yourself in just chaos.
Yeah. And I think it also has a lot to do with whoever's leading the meeting. There needs to be a defined leader of the meeting. In my opinion, in my experience, I've seen if there's not a clearly defined leader, and if that person is not fit or equipped to run the meeting, it can, and it's even happened to me where I've run meetings before and I'm like, oh, I got to stop myself because this feels like I'm just running an hour-long therapy session for myself, venting, talking about all the shit that happened that week and how much of a pain in the ass this person was, or how I really struggled with this project or whatever, when in reality, what I should be saying is, what am I on track with and what am I off track with? And I think you fall into that trap of, it's not a therapy session. It's not for you. It's to, like you said, keep everybody rowing in the right direction.
It's funny that you were saying there has to be a defined leader. And I don't know where I heard this. I heard this idea that you could, if you have the structure of the meeting so dialed in, you could, in theory, have multiple leaders of the meeting every single week, like change the person who's running the meeting, as long as the structure is there. Have you ever heard of that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you ever seen it work though?
Only in our real estate team. I think we have such a good structure in our real estate organization that, with a maybe 5-minute preparation time, almost anybody could run our weekly meetings, just because the structure is so well defined. And it's for us, it's all about accountability, and different businesses are going to want different things from their meetings. For us, it's just about, okay, what results were procured this week? So when I've done consulting with other businesses, I've asked them, okay, on a weekly basis, what are your KPIs? What are the deliverables that you're looking to track? And what does that scorecard look like? And does it make sense to look at it on a week-to-week basis? So one of the reasons that we don't track sales in our real estate business as a KPI on a weekly basis is it's not a leading indicator, it's a lagging indicator. And so what I mean by that is the sales occurred already. There's nothing that we could have changed or could have done differently. The result is there. The reason why we track things like number of connects within our CRM, which is our software that we, keep track of our leads and people that we speak to regularly, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why we focus on that is because those things will directly affect whether a sale will occur or won't occur. And because of that, we're able to make adjustments and hopefully generate more sales if we do more of the leading indicators.
So this is an interesting thing to get into, because I think if you're looking at basics of a meeting, you talked about the KPIs, key performance indicators, to tell you whether or not you're on track. But what if you're not there yet? Like, what if you just started with meetings? I'm thinking about, for myself, we started running media group meetings for Montreal's Real Estate Group. We've got a good leadership team built out for that. But now we're kind of trying to figure out what are the KPIs that we want to track and how do we want to build out our scorecard and what do we want to make it look like? So do you have any, because you've got your insurance company, you've got all of the companies that you work with ERS and all those other people that you're helping guide in this direction. Do you find that the KPIs just kind of show up, or do people have to work on finding them?
Great question. I think the end results usually are always there. What is sometimes ambiguous, especially in infancy, is going to be what are those leading indicators towards a successful blank, whatever that might be. So if I'm working with a social media management company, and usually it's okay if we've onboarded a client successfully, or if we've brought on an additional client, or if we've put out a successful post for them or whatever. You have to define what success looks like. And then you have to define, okay, what are the steps that lead towards that? So if, let's say it's as an example, a video with 100,000 views would be the thing, or 10,000 views even, or something like that. What are the things that need to be done for that to happen? Usually it's frequency, it's consistency. So it's, okay, how did we do X amount of videos this week? Did we do X amount of hours of production this week? As an example. Now, of course, that's going to change for everybody's business, whatever it might be. If I was, consulting for a roofing company, the KPIs would be very, very different. It would be, okay, I don't want to track necessarily how many roofs you did, because that's done already.
It's a lagging indicator.
Exactly. It's fully lagging. Whereas what I do want to see is, okay, how many quotes did you submit this week? How many people did you speak with? How many maybe inbound inquiries on the website did we see? Because then we can start tracking sort of a line graph of, okay, if this goes up, then we know X amount of time later, the sales go up. And which means revenue goes up, profit goes up, everybody wins, everybody's happy. But yeah, it's a really interesting thing, because everyone's going to have different leading indicators for what it is that they want the outcome to be.
My thought behind it is kind of the way that I always think of businesses when you're looking at, like, okay, you start the business and you think you're going to sell blue circles, but you started selling blue circles and you find green squares and you're like, green squares was where it was really at, but I would have never found green squares if I didn't start selling blue circles, right? So my thought is, okay, we think we need to track this, but realistically, that's like, if it's views, for instance, you're like, oh, it needs to be the amount of views. But then you're like, wait, no, views don't actually matter. Watch time matters. So our KPI should have been watch time in that situation. So I guess maybe it is a little bit organic, but it still needs to be purposeful. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think in general, you start tracking something. Tracking something is better than tracking nothing, that's for sure. And things will change. You remember, like, even in our real estate team, up until a year ago, we didn't track number of outings with buyers.
Yeah.
We only just realized, hey, that's probably something we should be tracking, so that we see if our agents are wasting their time running out, showing 100 houses a month and selling one house a month. Those are bad numbers. Usually you track a performance indicator to direct somebody to a resource. So if somebody's in charge of marketing and you've set KPIs like X amount of posts or whatever, if it's gone down, or the quality of the posts has gone down, or the engagement has gone down, then you know where to point them to a resource. If the engagement has gone down, you're probably going to point them to somewhere where they can work on more engaging posts, better ideas, better ideation, a better mastermind to be a part of. You can say, okay, this is where you need to go and get that. But if you weren't tracking that, you wouldn't know where they need their help. The same thing comes back to our real estate team is if somebody's going on 5 appointments and signing 0 of them, well, then we know they need to work on their in-person. But if they're calling 10,000 people and booking 1 appointment, we know that their skill over the phone is probably not where it needs to be. And we know where we can point them into good direction to get that coaching.
Yeah. So it really does, like we were saying before, like it's kind of righting the ship and getting everyone aligned. But now you start your meetings out and you're like, okay, we've got our scorecard and we're tracking something. We don't know if it's the right thing. Mm-hmm. We're tracking something. We're talking about what we're tracking. What else makes the meeting good from a basic standpoint that people should be focused on?
Yeah, I think the scorecard is the first thing that I typically implement when somebody has when I go in and I'm doing consulting for businesses. I'll say the first thing you need to do is you need to track some things that are important for you to track, and that makes sense to track on a weekly basis. And then from there, it's okay. What are the most important things for you to get done? This is how I start it. If I was going to come in as a consultant, I'd say, what are the most important things for you to get done this year in your business? This year, I'll go the entire year. And usually, if it's a good business, they'll have a crap ton of projects and things and stuff, and a lot of them are important, but not all of them have the same level of urgency. So what we'll do is we'll go through every single one of these things and say, okay, do we want to keep this? Do we want this to be a project that needs to be done within 3 months? Is this what's really important? And I think that's where your meetings start out as, okay, we're tracking some things, we're doing a couple of things here and there. That's when it gets upgraded to, okay, now we're looking at projects. Now we're looking at rocks, and this is a concept that's gone into a lot in a lot of the EOS books. But the concept of a rock is if you've got a jar and you need to fill it with pebbles, sand, water, and rocks. If you start with pebbles and sand and water, you're never going to fit the rocks in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have seen that video online of the professor kind of illustrating it with, I think he just does like certain size balls and then marbles and things like that. And then he adds the water last. He says, if you do it in the right order, you can get a lot of stuff done. But if you don't do it in the right order, it's going to be trouble. So then what happens is we take that list of like, let's say 30 projects and we get it down to like 6 or 7. And then we assign those rocks. And I think that's another kind of trap that a lot of people fall into when they're running meetings is they have multiple people responsible for singular goals. So an example would be, let's say in I'll use the roofing company thing again. Let's say they needed a new website. Okay. So this roofing company needs a new website because they don't even have a lead form on their website. They don't have a contact us button that like goes to a chat bot or anything like that. Like nothing is up to snuff when it comes to tech. So they've got new website. And for some reason, there's 3 dudes or 3 gals that are responsible for the creation of this website, or at least the finalization of the project of creating this website. The problem is when more than one people is responsible, nobody's responsible because the person's always going to want to pass the buck. Oh, I thought Daisy was going to do it. Oh, Daisy thought John was going to do it, or John thought Bob was going to do it, or whatever.
And it's so funny how people like to spread accountability across the table for projects, especially bigger ones, so that they don't have to be the one who's responsible for it. So they're like, well, me and Steve will do it together. So that way, we make sure we hold each other accountable to doing it. And it's like, no, you just held each other accountable to not doing anything.
That's exactly right, dude. I've seen it so much too. It's crazy. But that's another rule that's like super, super hard and fast with me is just, it's one person, one task. It's one person, one rock. And listen, you can call them whatever you want. You can call them quarterly goals. And listen, if you're accomplishing 80% of your quarterly goals, you're a phenomenal company. Like you're running your company extremely well. If your leadership team is accomplishing 80% of what they need to be doing on a quarterly basis, that's insanely great. That's the number that usually is like.
Well, I think if you're accomplishing everything that you're setting out to do, then you're just not setting out to do enough, right? I love the idea of having having the weekly level 10 meetings and having meetings that like a meeting pulse that keeps everything going forward versus having the big EOS day where you have a lot of goal setting and planning for quarterlies that you can then come back to and focus on the big rocks with those weekly meetings that are holding you accountable to accomplish the rocks. But that also gives you the ability to say, okay, let's get rid of these things that aren't as important, or we just can't focus on it right now. I know for us, one of them was we wanted to move over the website, and we were like, we're just not, while we're focusing on these 10 other things, we can't do the website at the same time. We have to put the website into Q2 or Q3 while we get these other things kind of sorted out, and we'll focus on those rocks for those quarters. But yeah, I think that's the difference between like just the regular level 10 meeting that you would do as the meeting pulse to keep everybody up to date and on track versus like the big EOS day where management is getting together and all the big projects are being shelled out for that quarter, that year, whatever the thing is going to be.
Yeah, usually like one of my favorite books on this subject, by the way, is a book called Meetings Suck by Cameron Herold. It's a really, really cool meeting. He's the same guy that wrote Double Double. He's the guy that took 1-800-GOT-JUNK and like exploded that company. And he's awesome. I had a chance to interview him back in when we went to Tahoe that time. So it was he's awesome. The book is great. Definitely huge recommend on that. But he just talks about the main problem. Well, there's actually a few different styles of meetings, right? We talked about at the beginning the more reporting style meeting, where it's okay, we're doing like what we do weekly with the agents. You know, those are typically by department. It never really scales up to C-suite. Like when we do our level 10. Level 10 is more for C-suite, right? And so you have reporting meetings that go through salespeople's numbers, marketing people's KPIs, whatever they might be, engagement, views, posts, whatever. And then, you know, HR will have the same thing. Finance will have the same thing where they're just looking at reporting. And then those numbers creep up to the main scorecard for C-suite. And so those are the two sort of main different styles of meeting. And then you, as a C-suite, you can have specifically decision-making meetings. So a decision-making meeting would be like, okay, we have to decide right now, and this would be more like the quarterly thing. What are we going to work on for the next 3 months? What is going to be our priority? What's urgent and important? What is in that beautiful quadrant where it's both super important and really important to get done as soon as humanly possible? But I mean, the main thing is, if you skip on meetings just in general, I think you're missing out on something that could be spectacular. But I think if you're not auditing yourself and your meetings regularly, I think you could get lost in just doing meetings for the sake of meetings. And to me, it reminds me a lot of just busy work. You know, when
doing a meeting for the sake of a meeting, just to be like, we did a meeting today.
Yeah, we accomplished so much today.
Look at us. We deserve a cookie.
We're so great.
I'm making a trophy. But yeah, I think auditing is another way to be able to kind of open up the floor for everybody to have a discussion about what in the meeting could be improved. I think the meetings have to evolve. And I've seen that with our team as well, just how much the meetings have evolved from when we first started running our administrative meetings to where they're at now. It's on a completely different planet. They're not even on the same like ground at all, because we went from not knowing what we were tracking and how to keep things organized globally to now everything, you know, like you were saying, we have to keep track of the managers who manage the people underneath who are doing the reporting back to C-suite to be able to keep things in control, but then also not spend 5 hours in a meeting, cut out the stuff that's unnecessary, and then kind of keep auditing the meetings down to ensure that they're the most potent that they can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about doing meetings regularly, a lot of people will say, yeah, we meet regularly, and they never get actually down to the nitty gritty. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about the EOS style of running meetings, and we're going to just give you guys everything now on a silver platter now. But one of the things that you've heard us say is the concept of a level 10 meeting. And the reason why it's called a level 10 meeting is, like we said, you need to be constantly looking at how do you improve your meetings? Because if you don't do that, you might get stuck in a trap where you're saying, I did a meeting today, look how great I am. And in this case, at the end of every meeting, and we're not perfect at this, but it is something that what we need to be doing more and more, which is rate the meeting. The reason why they call it a level 10 meeting is you're never actually going to have a level 10 meeting, but you rate the meeting. You say, okay, how do we do today? Scale of 1 to 10, as Dave Portnoy would say, no rookie scores, right? So you can't say 9 or 8 or 7 because that's lame. You want to say like 7.8 or 7.2 or 8.6 or 8.4 or whatever. And you're striving for that 10. It'll never happen because 10s don't exist. They're unicorns. But you strive for that. Now, the agenda in general for a properly run EOS meeting is you start with a little banter, a little segue, because you don't just want to come in and immediately start talking business. That's weird and nobody really likes that, right? And then you can go into, and there's a little bit of wiggle room, but the first X amount of sections, the first 5 or 6 sections are all only 5 minutes. Basically, they're just designed to be quick sort of check-ins on things. So example would be the first one that we look at is the scorecard. Let's take a look at the scorecard. And so for us, like we said, we're looking at leading indicators, like how many connects were made, how many visits were done, et cetera, et cetera. In the insurance business, it's completely different. It's how many submissions did we have, how many inbound attempts did we have, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone's going to have different look at their scorecard, but it has to make sense on a weekly basis. You're not going to look at, things that have no bearing on a week to week, something that you can change within a week and hopefully affect change in 4 to 8 weeks from then. So you take a look at your scorecard. After that, you look at your customer and employee headlines. What are people saying about you? And this is not designed to be, a negativity, bash session of your own company. It's designed to celebrate some wins that happened that week. Who inside the company did an awesome job that is so awesome that you need to talk about it in your leadership meeting. Who's going the extra mile? And then, of course, there are going to be some things where, and it's natural that you're going to gravitate towards the negative stuff because, those things are, I don't know, it's human nature, who knows. But, you go through the customer and employee headlines, who's in the company that's doing great, who might need a sit down, who might need some disciplinary action, who might need a high five, I don't know, whatever.
I think that's a great place to be looking at seats and people, like right person, right seat. Mm-hmm. If somebody's really good at something and there's a project that's upcoming, doing the employee headlines is really a place where you're like, we've talked about this person so many times. I know we did that with an agent last year where we had him in one seat and we kept talking about him doing something that he just naturally was better at. And the positivity of the focus on what he was doing in that space is what made us decide, he's in the wrong seat. We need to move him over to running events because he's just the guy for running events. And then we were able to move him over, but it was the headline. He kept showing up in the headline in that way. Instead of focusing on all of the negative headlines that could come up, you focus on the positive ones, and that can help direct some part of your business and how you kind of evolve over time too.
Yeah, of course. You always want to have the right people in the right seat, meaning they get it, they want to do it, they have the capacity to do it, they're excited, all that fun stuff. So after you run through the customer employee headlines, you'll typically hit your to-do list and your rocks. So these are different, right? So the rocks are the quarterly goals. The to-do lists are just things that need to get done that week. And again, assigned to one person and one person only per task. You don't want more than one person accountable because when more than one person is accountable, nobody's accountable. Mm-hmm. So you run through that. And then after that's done, that's it. After that, you run into the best part of the entire meeting, which is you solving issues. What are some things that maybe it came up when you were looking at your numbers? Maybe it came up while, we were going through the customer and employee headlines. Maybe it was something that happened, but you don't fall into the trap of addressing these things that turn into therapy sessions, at the beginning of the meeting when it's typically more reporting at the beginning. It's more quick looks, making sure everybody's on track, everybody's doing what they're meant to be doing. Awesome. Now, if there was anything off track or anything that needs to be talked about at the end of the meeting, then the ending part where you're solving issues is where this happens. And so usually these meetings are anywhere between an hour or an hour and a half, preferably an hour and a half. The first 30 minutes is just all the reporting, the headlines that we talked about. And the last entire hour is spent solving issues. Yeah. And it's totally normal to not solve all the issues on the board in a meeting.
Well, and that's actually what I was going to touch on too, is that I find people get stuck in meetings where they're either stuck in the weeds or they're banging their heads against a wall that just can't be broken through at that moment. Sometimes you need things to percolate and you need it to sit. So I know you've gotten really good at this where we're stuck on something and we're just beating our heads against the wall. And we're like, when you're naturally, we want to problem solve. Our minds are stuck on wanting to solve the problem and it hurts to not solve it. But sometimes you just can't. So being able to say, we're going to come back to this one. We'll leave this one here. We'll deal with it later. We have to get to the next thing in line to focus on solving that. And I forget if it was Cameron Herold or if it was Gino Wickman. But they have this idea of like end the meeting 5 minutes early, right? Have that idea of finishing the meeting a little bit earlier so that you can have that 5-minute wrap up and close out the meeting so that it doesn't feel like it dragged and it went on too long. So once you've solved all of your problems, being able to close up that meeting and move on and get back to the things that you need to be able to do. I don't know if that is that.
I don't remember which one. It's got to be one of them because they're the guys that we read and preach about for meetings.
Yeah.
It's so common for me when I've done consultations with businesses where their meetings are literally just issue after issue after issue after issue. They're not looking at any of their KPIs. They're not doing any sort of responsibility tracking or accountability or anything like that. No project management whatsoever. And they just spend the entire time talking about crappy things that are happening in the business. And everybody just feels like it's a big, sad dump of negativity for an hour. And then they leave the meeting and everyone's like, why isn't my team more gung-ho to do more business? I'm like, maybe because that's the most depressing thing I've ever seen in my life. Of course, I don't say it exactly like that. But what I do recommend is that people, when there is something to talk about it, you save it for the end and you do the process, which is, again, outlined in the EOS books, which is to identify, discuss, and solve, which I just love. It makes so much sense to me because a lot of people jump to the solution right away. And sometimes it'll band-aid it. But the idea is that you don't want to address the same crap every single 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever. You don't want the issue to come back. And the reason it would come back is if you hadn't identified what the real reason behind that issue is. So as an example, let's say an agent on the team is not producing at a high level, or they just don't have the motivation. And we jump to a solution. Okay, we're going to sign them up for this 10X event, or we're going to sign them up for this thing, or, the fast cap program or whatever. And,
or we'll just flood them with like 1,000 more leads and they'll do better because we gave them 1 million more leads. Logic, right? But if you don't know what the problem is, then you're going to spend thousands of dollars worth of leads to an agent to get them to produce better. And what's going to happen?
Yeah. All lost money.
Yeah. Because that wasn't the issue. The issue was that the agent wasn't motivated. The agent was overwhelmed. The agent didn't have the support that they specifically needed because the management wasn't looking at what support that agent specifically needed. They didn't identify the actual issue. They thought that the solve for it was just to shower leads on top, and now they just lost a ton of money.
Which is hilarious too, because if you've got somebody that for some reason is having, maybe the real reason is the person's having sort of like an identity crisis, and they're like, oh my God, I can't call these leads. I'm not good enough. They're dealing with imposter syndrome or something, and your solution is to throw a bunch of leads at them. That's obviously not going to work, right? So that issue will then come back. You're like, oh my God, our cost per lead is up and our lead conversion is down. And it's like, oh, maybe that had something to do with flooding that guy with 100 leads when he wasn't ready to do that, or he wasn't trained well enough, or whatever. So you isolate what the real issue is, and then what you can do is you discuss possible solutions and which one is going to be the most likely to succeed. But I find that nobody spends enough time really diving into what the root cause of this issue could be. And then because of that issue comes back in a couple of weeks, and they're wondering, wow, we're constantly talking about, Matthew, why is he always on our list? Like, well, maybe because we're not talking about the right things with this salesperson.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. So the IDS for the meeting, coming back to IDS, but then once you've identified, discussed, and solved the issues, at the end of the meeting, during the recap, I know there's something that we always like to do. And I noticed that we do it more in larger group meetings than we do in more intimate, like admin type meetings, where it's areas for improvement. And I think because we have a more dialed in IDS structure for our admin meetings versus our group meetings with the team, those group meetings, we have that areas for improvement talk and the wins for the week to kind of keep morale up. And then we got some wins in. Okay, cool. And now what can we improve on and get kind of more voices in for that to take those ideas back to the admin meeting? Do you think there's a place for areas for improvement in the level 10 meeting, or is that where IDS is really just the solve?
Yeah, I think in general, you would know where the areas for improvement are during your big quarterlies. So your big quarterlies, you're discussing, okay, did we smash these rocks? What other rocks do we need to do for the next quarter? And usually those rocks are directly linked to a gap in what's going on regularly in the company. So and like the example I gave before where the roofing company needed a website, right? So that's a huge area for improvement, is their technological presence or their, social media presence or whatever. That's a huge area for improvement. So usually it's C-suite's job to kind of address the large gaps in the company. And then, talking about a sales meeting, having them be able to, giving them a voice, I think is really important, because these days people want to feel like they're really, really a part of things, and giving them space to feel that, and to, and a lot of the times the ideas are really good too.
I think that's huge. You'll get new ideas that you didn't even think of because you're so focused on all this other stuff.
Exactly.
That someone in the trenches is like, oh yeah, actually this would really help. And you're like, I didn't even think of that because I'm not dealing with that. I'm over here. So huge. But I do 100% agree too. And I think those reporting meetings with larger groups that are reporting in that way, being able to give them that voice to make it feel like it's more theirs. People are much more excited about their, completing their own ideas. I actually did a training a little while ago about cortisol reaction and response to stress. And it actually wasn't directly related to stress. There's actually studies that show that it's related to stress when you're not in control. So the amount of control you have and allow yourself to be in a stressful situation is determined by the amount of control that you have. So if you were the one who made the decision, I'm going to build XYZ and I want to do this, versus someone's like, go build XYZ, like this shed that you have to go build. And you're like, I don't want to do this. I think this is stupid. I hate this idea. The stress response in your body is going to be significantly higher than if you were like, there needs to be a shed there. I'm going to build that. And then you go and do it. You get a different stress response inside of your body, and you're much more inclined to complete the task and work harder at the task than if you didn't. So giving the people in the team a voice and making it their idea rather than telling them like, hey, go do this. Well, their stress response to actually doing it, it's now their idea. They're much more likely to want to tackle it and do it.
That's awesome. It reminds me a lot of one of my favorite books of all time. Can you guess what it is?
Is it not extreme ownership? No.
Nope.
Is it Goggins Can't Hurt Me?
No. love me some Goggins though. No, dude, it's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Nice. Yeah, Dale Carnegie.
It's just at scale.
Yeah.
Right. We're just talking about at scale. You make somebody believe it's their idea to go out and do something. You just sold them on the idea of being super productive. It's a very interesting dichotomy that we're in the real estate business, where everybody is their own boss. So it's just not very many people are really good at being their own boss. So they need a little help, little accountability. And that's why, real estate coaching exists. And that's why the coaching business in general exists, is because people are not often very good at being their own boss. They might be great entrepreneurs, but they need that next extra level of accountability.
Well, and I think that's kind of a lot of what we've even seen with this podcast, is a lot of people having that barrier where they're really good at something and then they want to turn into a business, and then they step out into building a business and then they realize like, oh God, this was a whole other thing. There's so much more here. And that's the truth for real estate as well. A lot of people get into real estate and then it really very quickly becomes, holy crap, this is not just, the agency's not just going to give me leads and I get to go and show houses and everything's great. It's like, I have to generate the leads for myself. I have to build this business. I have to do the taxes. I have to get and then I have to somehow grow, because AI and the world is changing so fast. So it does get scary for a lot of people. And that's why I think, coaching has exploded and teams for real estate have exploded, and just business in general needing to be more guided, refined, and just organized. Huge. And that's where the meetings, I think, if you're not doing them and you're not doing them effectively, you're bleeding out time, you're bleeding out just everything in those meetings and not being as productive as you could be. So I think by having some sort of a structure for your meeting, like things we've talked about today, huge. That's game changing.
And I think putting yourself in a mindset of, if I'm going to take my team of salespeople, let's say there's 20 in our case, let's say there's 20 salespeople. If I'm going to take them out of their day for an hour, I'm taking away 20 hours of prospecting. It better be worth that. So I think if you have that mindset going into a meeting, being like, okay, if there's 3 people in this meeting, if there's 5 people in this meeting, that's 5 hours I'm taking away from a working day. 5 man hours are getting removed. So it has to be worth it. So with that in mind, we've given you the tools now, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Montreal's Elite Unleashed, the podcast for hustlers looking to level up their lives. My name is Logan Boyce. Again, we got John Ehrlich here.
Hey.
And we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in.